It's a great pleasure to be able to welcome Christopher Smith. He is the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Oil and Natural Gas at the Office of Fossil Energy at the U.S. Department of Energy. Chris comes with a long experience in the oil and gas sector and a varied experience, not only serving in the industry itself, but also working on Wall Street in emerging markets and derivatives, which gives you an extra perspective on questions related to what we were talking about before, about whether we're going to have natural gas markets and competition with LNG and what's it going to mean for price and so forth. So it's really a pleasure to have Chris here with us today. And I think that he will shed some light on some of the regulatory challenges and other issues that are facing the United States as we move downward. And voicing from the first panel my view that it is really going to be a revolutionary industry with large impacts across the globe. So be interesting to continue this dialogue now. Chris, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Amy, for that kind introduction. And as distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to come and talk before this group today. We actually had a really good opening panel with the Undersecretary Stelmach and Ambassador Morningstar, who actually queued up some of the things that I'll talk about here today. So over the next few minutes, what I'm going to try to do is focus a little bit on the experience here in the United States of shale gas, some of the things that this administration is working on in terms of developing this resource, and where we see some of the challenges that we face here, and hopefully that will segue into some observations about some of the challenges that are going to be faced globally in terms of taking this resource and developing it. So, I'll start out just by making a couple of observations about comments that the President has made on this topic in terms of what are our principles of developing oil and natural gas. How do we see fossil energy fitting into the clean energy economy of the future? So I just picked a couple of comments that have been made here recently. The quote there down at the bottom was from the President's energy speech in Georgetown back in March of this year. And he said, "When I was elected to this office, America imported 11 million barrels of oil a day. By a little more than a decade from now, we will have cut that by 1/3. That is something that we can achieve." Last year, the top quote there was a comment that the President made while the Macondo well was still flowing into the Gulf of Mexico, and there's still a tremendous amount of uncertainty about how that event was going to play out. But in the middle of that struggle, the President commented that I continue to believe that domestic oil production is an important part of our overall strategy for energy security, but I've always said that it must be done responsibly for the safety of our workers and our environment. And then last was a comment that he made in November of last year. And this was a comment that he made in response to a question they got from a reporter who was asking, in this difficult environment in Washington, in this increasingly polarized political environment, how are we going to make sure that we've got some initiatives that we're moving forward, that we're making progress? And of all the areas, of all the endeavors that we're working on, the thing that the President pointed to on 2 occasions was natural gas, stating that, hey, we've got this great resource. Are we doing everything that we can to prudently develop it? So when you look to see at, well, what is the Department of Energy working on, and where's our true north in terms of what we think about oil and natural gas and developing this resource, I think that's a good reference to point out kind of what we're working on. So if you think back to what the President stated about reducing imports by 1/3 over the next decade, it brings you back to the question of, well, where are new resources going to come from? How do you continue to develop your domestic oil and gas resources in such a way that you cut the amount of oil that you're having to import from other countries? And it points to 2 different areas, offshore and shale, and I'll be talking about the second here today. But when you look at where new resources are coming from, where new reserves are being added, it's common knowledge that the easy stuff to find and produce has been found and produced, and that as we are continuing forward to replace those reserves that our voracious appetite for oil and natural gas is consuming on an annual basis, it's going to come from these two areas. two different types of challenges here. So if you look at oil, or particularly offshore deep water, prodigiously difficult technical challenge as you move from onshore to 5,000 feet of water to 10,000 feet of water. The challenges of producing these large formations in 2 miles of water are very technically complex, technically difficult, but you do have a comparatively straightforward regulatory environment where you've got a consistent set of entities that set the rules. If you compare that to the shale gas challenge, you do have some technical challenges there. Industry is moving forward to get better at producing more difficult unconventional resources. Horizontal laterals are getting longer, multi-stage fracs are getting larger and more powerful, but the technical challenge is something you can get your head around. It's the regulatory challenge that's truly difficult. The regulatory challenge, not only in the way that we regulate shale gas development that's primarily on private land, which means it's regulated by the states. 32 different oil and gas producing states here in the United States that have different sets of standards and regulations and budgets for inspectors and permitting processes. So, and within each one of those states, you've got a myriad of counties and cities and municipalities, all with different rules. So the regulatory challenge here is very complex. It's a different type of resource to develop in terms of the way that you develop it. Once you find it, or once you get good at developing a play, it does turn into something like a manufacturing process that involves a continuous drilling process. And it's a resource that we're developing in areas which, in many cases, the people who live there are not used to oil and gas production, and that causes some challenges. So those are kind of how we see the two different challenges. This is a slide I like to show that kind of illustrates why we think natural gas is important in terms of being a solution that's going to bring bigger diversity to our economy and bring new options for American consumers that will have the potential to reduce the price that Americans pay for energy. So on this chart, what I'm showing here is the Atlantic Basin arbitrage, which is the difference between energy prices in the UK and in the United States. So that black line there in the middle is the oil arbitrage. That's the difference between WTI and Brent as a percentage of WTI. So, and you can't really see that, but you see that black line is relatively flat. Now, even this line's gotten a little weird here recently. I think that the WTI Brent spread went up to $28 yesterday or this week. So it's starting to even that relationship is starting to change, and there's some reasons for that. I mean, there's some questions about whether WTI is really the appropriate representative price for American crude. But what this generally shows you is that there is a fungible global market for oil. That's something that we understand. This brown line that has a lot more movement to it is the Atlantic Basin arbitrage for gas. So what that shows you is that gas has the potential to change the real price dynamics of a particular market. As you do things to incentivize and to create an environment where you can prudently develop a gas resource, you do have the potential to impact the price that folks who live in that area are paying. And this is kind of a couple of observations that kind of lead to why that is. So I just got three simple bar charts here. One just shows global production of crude and gas. So, lots of crude produced worldwide, lots of gas. The second chart shows of that crude and of that gas that's produced, how much of it gets on a boat and goes from market to market to equilibrize to equilize prices. So about half of the crude that's produced moves from market to market, whereas just a very small sliver of natural gas via LNG gets traded and moves from basin to basin to equalize prices and close arbitrages. And that's kind of driven by the third bar chart there. Global fleet of around 11,000 crude tankers, where you've got a global fleet of about 300 LNG ships. So LNG markets are becoming more transparent. They are becoming more global. They are becoming more liquid. But there's a long way to go to make LNG and natural gas look like crude. So that's something that's of great interest to us within the U.S. government, within the Department of Energy. We see there's some benefits to helping us produce oil domestically because it helps you balance trade, it builds jobs. But natural gas not only does those things, but also has the potential to bring more supply into U.S. markets that has an impact on American consumers. The thing that we think will equalize prices globally, potentially, will be not connecting markets via LNG, but taking the technologies that were developed here in the United States in terms of developing shale gas and exporting those technologies to other markets and giving other markets the ability to develop their domestic resources in a way that brings greater supply to those markets and helps those consumers and helps those economies. So this is a chart that I imagine you've seen before. This was a global shale gas assessment that was done by Bela Kruskra from Advanced Resources Incorporated, ARI, through the Department of Energy. So this was an early assessment of where we see potential globally. USGS is currently working on a second assessment that's going to build on this chart. But what you see is certainly globally lots of opportunity in terms of shale gas development. So I won't talk at length about what this means to Poland. I mean, I think we've got some other folks who are going to be speaking who can speak to that with a lot more clarity than I can. But what I can say is that we spend a lot of time speaking with delegations from around the world who are interested not only in getting some insights into the technologies that American companies are using here in the United States to develop this resource, but also the regulatory path that we've gone through that has led to the success. And we think that both of those things are critically important. Just a note, I'll speak in a moment about a couple of studies that are assisting the Department of Energy in understanding what the challenges are and what needs to happen next in terms of research and development, technology, and regulatory process. But one study that we've just launched or just completed actually, is a study that was conducted by the National Petroleum Council. The National Petroleum Council is a federal advisory committee that advises the Secretary of Energy on oil and gas issues. It's composed primarily of oil and gas producers, but also from other stakeholders, both from non-governmental organizations, environmental organizations, academic organizations. So there's a broad range of stakeholders who work on that NPC study. And this NPC study focused largely on shale. I mean, shale gas was one of the big things that this NPC study looked at. And as we went through that process, it actually gives you a little bit of humility about the ability for big groups of smart people to pull out their crystal ball and see things clearly in terms of what's going to happen next. You rewind and you look at that NPC study that was done just a few years ago, the hard truth story, and that was the LNG story. I mean, the answer was LNG. The story was about LNG. Industry was putting lots and lots of dollars into importing LNG into the U.S., producing it overseas and bringing it in to sell to American consumers. And you fast forward a few years and you see how differently things pan out. So even as we look at our current crystal ball, which we're talking about what's going to happen next, and we're trying to do smart things about moving forward into the clean energy economy of the future, we're also aware of the fact that there's a lot of uncertainty when it comes to developing technologies, and there's a lot of uncertainty when it comes to the regulatory environment and gaining the confidence of communities as well. So that's something that we try to have some humility about, and make sure we're creating the greatest number of options for us going forward. So a lot of the questions and the comments that were made by Undersecretary Stelmach and Ambassador Morningstar had to do with this issue of how do we ensure that we're developing this resource in such a way that we've got the right type of environmental sustainability, the right type of safety. Certainly, if you look back to the mandate that we've been given at the Department of Energy in terms of managing a portfolio of research projects to help us do this well, we've got a clear goal and a clear mandate of making sure that we can do this in a way that's safe and that's environmentally sustainable. And that's something that we can do. There's been a couple of studies that have occurred parallel with the NPC study that I just mentioned. One of them was the Secretary of Energy's Advisory Board, which independently came up with a lot of recommendations that fairly closely paralleled the recommendations that came out of the NPC study in terms of, what are the types of best practices that need to be employed? How do you make sure that you're addressing the concerns that communities have? One of the things that you observe is that there are some technical challenges that have to do with the hydraulic fracturing process, but that's probably one of the less interesting things that we have to wrestle with. A lot of the things that we have to deal with have to do with best practices, have to do with dealing with contaminants, have to deal with surface impacts, have to deal with trucks on roads. So there's a lot of smart things that have to do with best practices that we can do to minimize the impact that this resource has on consumers in such a way that you get the most out of the resource. I shared an OTC panel with the VP for drilling at Chevron, who actually kind of summed this point up very nicely. I mean, a comment that he made was that the license to operate for companies, wherever you are, be it in Pennsylvania or Nigeria, the license to operate doesn't come from the ministry, it doesn't come from the Department of Interior or the state regulators. It really comes from the people who live and work in the communities where you're producing. Because at the end of the day, those are the folks that you're responsible for. And I'll make an observation here that I've had just personally. I've been in this role for a couple of years. I came from industry, and one of the first assignments that I had in my current role was I was a designated federal official for the President's Commission on the BP Deepwater Horizon oil spill. So while that spill was still going on, while that well was still belching hydrocarbons into the Gulf of Mexico, I was down with that panel in New Orleans, speaking in front of a packed auditorium of folks, talking about the things that group was going to do to make sure that we understood what went wrong while things were still going wrong at the time, and spent a good deal of time with public comment, giving people the opportunity to come up and say, well, here's what we think, here's what's going wrong, what's going on. A lot of concerns in that room, a lot of fear, a lot of uncertainty, but it was, I think, a constructive conversation around here's how we understand what people are concerned about. Well, you fast forward a year and a half, and I also was the federal official for the first hearing in Pennsylvania for the Secretaries of Energy's Advisory Board that we did just outside of Pittsburgh. And if I compare the mood, the spirit, the level of vitriol on all sides of the ongoing disaster versus the hearing that I did in Pennsylvania, it was no comparison. I mean, that was like walking into a religious revival tent. It was a lot of very strongly held opinions of varying types on both sides of the issue. And as I talk to people one-on-one about what are we concerned about, what are we doing, what type of research are we dealing with, I generally tend to have very rational conversations about what you need to do and how it could happen, and how it should move forward that makes the best sense for the economy and for all the stakeholders. But that's a difficult path to walk sometimes, right? And there's a lot of reasons for that I'd be happy to address. But as you look at the recommendations that we've gotten out of the SEIA about the Secretary of Energy's Advisory Board and out of the National Petroleum Council, one of the things that is really encouraging is that if you look at the interests of government, if you look at the interests of private sector, and you look at the interests of NGOs, there's a big degree of overlap here on this Venn diagram when it comes to best practices and environmental sustainability. So, as companies engage in this discussion, and I've been very pleased and with the feedback that we've gotten from a lot of producers as they wrestle with these issues, it's very clear that good practices and producing in a way that's environmentally sustainable and safe is just good business. That's the way that you want to produce. And the idea of having transparent, rigorous standards, the idea of having a transparent disclosure regime so that people understand what chemicals are being used, the idea of having a well-funded and well-staffed regulatory function that's actually able to to oversee the activities in a way that's open and transparent and fair. That's not only good for communities, that's not only good for the environment, but it's also good for companies. So as I've had discussions, elsewhere around the world, we spend some time talking about what we learned technically and the things that we're doing around induced microseismicity and cementing and casing standards and all those other technical things that we're concerned about. But the dialogue tends to come back to this issue of how do you manage this overlap? How do you make sure that there's a clear and transparent dialogue between producers and the people who live in the communities where you're going to be producing? And how do you get ahead of that, right? How do you start out doing that well, as opposed to having things go pear-shaped and then having to catch up with them? So I think that's one of our challenges. And this is the thing that we are doing within the Department of Energy to address this. I'm honored to be working for, I think, a very capable and scientifically minded Secretary of Energy, who also happens to be a Nobel Prize-winning physicist. And he's taken a real interest in this issue. Back on the 30th of March, when the President was talking to the nation in his energy speech from Georgetown, he spent a good portion of that speech addressing Secretary Chu, saying that I'm going to ask my Secretary of Energy to look into this process and make sure that we within government understand and have appropriately quantified the risks such that the regulations that are put in place are appropriate to mitigate the risks. So taking what can be an emotional conversation and turning into a scientific conversation, doing the work to quantify the risks and to evaluate claims that are being made, and making sure that the regulations are in place match the risks that are inherent in the operations is going to be something that's going to be very useful in moving this forward and gaining the confidence of communities so that we can prudently develop this resource. So this is just a couple of blurbs from the Department of Energy's strategic plan. When we think about the clean energy economy of the future, it's clear that right now we're in a situation where 98% of the miles that are driven in the United States are fueled by oil. I joined Texaco back in 1998 when oil was at 11 or 12 bucks. I left in 2008, in which it was $140. So I wasn't there for that long, right? And you saw an incredible swing. And when you've got such single commodity dominance in a market, when oil is $140, you pay $140. When it's $11, it's $11, and that's what you pay because you don't have any alternatives. So we're very interested in diversifying our economy, but when you look at the goals, the specific goals that Secretary of Energy has given the NPC in terms of the studies that he's asked for, we've got a study that's looking at the future transportation fuels right now that's going to address that very question. And his question to the NPC for that study was, what technological path, what regulatory path do we need to follow to reduce the greenhouse gas impact of the transportation sector by 50% by 2050? So big goal, a big shift when you look at a sector that's so dominated by a single commodity. But the Secretary wasn't asking about 2012 or 2020 or 2025, it was 2050. It's a long runway. So we understand that for the national security of the country and for the economic well-being of our economy, that oil and gas is going to continue to be extremely important for the foreseeable future. And so the challenges that we face in terms of making sure that we can prudently develop the resource, that we can do it as well as possible, that we can get the most out of the resource, that's going to be extremely important for national security. It's going to be important for our economy. It's going to be important for building jobs. So that's at the heart, kind of the things that we're working on here. We've spent a fair amount of time looking at international issues in terms of providing support to other nations, and not only sharing kind of what we've learned and some of our missteps here in the United States, but also looking for opportunities for American companies to invest abroad in a way that's mutually beneficial for American companies and for the economies in which we're investing. So that's something that's of great interest. We see the shale gas story as being of great importance throughout the world. I was just in China speaking with our Chinese counterparts about this very issue. Lots of challenges around, how do you create the regulatory environment that appropriately incentivizes production in a way that builds the resource there in China. My interaction that I've had with American companies investing in Poland is that the ball's really moving in the right direction. So I think that's really encouraging. So those are the comments that I had for today. Again, what I wanted to do was really focus on, what are we doing here? What are we learning within the U.S. And I think that there's some applications to other countries, particularly to Poland, and our experience here in the U.S. So I'd be happy to take some questions if there's time to do so.
Questions? No? Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to ask our morning panel to come and join me at the table. I have going to present just a few slides overseeing our latest study that we put together for the U.S. Department of Energy to set the context for the conversation. Some of our comments so far have been about geopolitics, and I know we're going to have a session this afternoon on some of the regulatory and infrastructure issues, so I'm just going to address the geopolitical issues briefly. So in our view, the advent of shale gas and other unconventional resources is really going to change the global energy landscape. We're already seeing that. And one of the things that's so interesting, I think, about shale and the opportunities it presents is that we're used to thinking about the resources, which this is a satellite photo of the global continents, and the pretty red and purples are the location of the previous concept of the traditional resources. And you can see that those resources were very far away from the white dots where the lights are on. And so there was a challenge for the industry in the logistics of developing resources in these very distant regions and getting them to consumer markets. What's so interesting about shale is that the resources are located where the lights are on. And that's going to provide very huge benefits in terms of security and price. And we're already seeing that here in the United States, and I would expect that we would see that in Poland shortly as the shale gas comes on the market, and we're going to see that increasingly in Europe and as Chris mentioned, probably also in China. And those things are going to have strong implications for trade flow in natural gas. So this is a slide from our DOE study that shows that through our modeling that by 2030, shale gas will represent 50% of U.S. production and probably 30% of total Canadian production. It's a huge change in thinking about the market. For Europe, and this is very preliminary assessments because we're still all learning about how much shale there is in Europe, we would predict that European shale would become about 35% of total production by 2040, coming in at a later time because it's going to take some time to develop the technology and the expertise and the infrastructure and also the market structure. Here in the United States, we have a well-established regulatory framework for open access to pipelines. We had a existing spot market and futures market for natural gas pricing and transparent pricing, and so small producers could enter the market easily and put their production right into demand centers. So in Europe, you have a lot of big players and you have a lot of infrastructure needs that would have to be developed to make natural gas trade around Europe more efficient. And so therefore it's going to take a longer period of time probably to implement than it did here in the United States. But the consequence, the geopolitical consequence or benefit of diverse supply is going to make it worth going through the painful political choices to get this resource to market and to do the kind of market reforms that it's going to take to make shale a reality in Europe. And when we project that through our computer simulations, what we find is that Russia's market share for non-FSU Europe would fall to just about 13%, from almost close to a third today, and that's a really significant change in the variety of sources for natural gas in Europe coming forward in the next decades. And then also, interestingly, as we watch the turmoil across the Middle East, our view is that the development of shale gas globally, but importantly in North America, is really going to delay heavy reliance on Middle East gas for decades. And we're going to see really a changed supply outlook that doesn't, for 20 years everybody's predicted that the globe is going to be overly dependent on supply from the Middle East, and shale gas is going to mean that in the gas world, that reality is not going to happen. So I invite our other panelists to come to the table, and we're going to talk a little bit about shale in Poland. And I'd like to ask Paweł Jagosiak to please come to the table, and Andrzej Kozlowski, Timothy Probert, and we will manage the panel efficiently. Everybody will make a short opening presentation remarks, and then we'll have a discussion as a panel. So we're going to start with Mr. Kozlowski. I'm announcing that so his slides will magically appear.
There they are.
Okay, very good.
Okay, thank you very much. Dear friends of shale gas, dear friends of Poland, or standing here, being here in the great state of Texas, perhaps I should start howdy. Okay, it's been a great and very interesting conference so far. And there was a number of interesting questions. But I think that the one very valid question that still is hanging in the air, which I'll try to answer, is will or can actually the shale gas in Poland become the next success story? Because we've been talking about geopolitics, about energy security, but the real question from people like me, and sorry, but I'm neither geologist nor engineer. I'm the strategy guy. So for me, the question is, will this additional supply meet the demand? Is Poland ready for development of shale gas? I mean, it's great to be the first, but on the other hand, it's a challenge. So, having said that, I prepared a couple of slides to present shale gas more from the perspective, or just to show kind of a business perspective, because I mean, when I was asked by the Polish embassy to come here and to speak, I asked myself the question: what those guys from Houston would like to hear from the guy from Poland, given that you've been extracting shale gas for 10 years now, you've drilled tens of thousands of wells. Whereas in Poland, we are just starting. Okay, so I don't want to talk, I'm not brave enough to talk about shale gas. So let me just talk about strategy, business, and things like that. Okay, so just very quickly, first, a couple of words about Orlen, for those of you who don't know the company. Orlen is the leading producer and the dealer of refined products and petrochemical products in Central and Eastern Europe. We operate 7 refineries in Poland, Czech Republic, Lithuania. We also have the largest retail network, the service station network in the Central and Eastern Europe. It's about 2,700 filling stations. We are a listed company. The largest shareholder of Orlen is a Polish state, which holds some 27.5% of the shares. The remaining shares are free floated. And we are also one of the largest companies in the Central and Eastern Europe in terms of revenues. Last year we recorded $27.7 billion US dollars. That was our turnover. Some people don't know, but we are actually also one of the major consumers of Russian crude oil. We buy each year some 11 to 13% of the total production of REPCO of the Russian Federation, which makes us one of the biggest customers actually of Russia in that respect. So far, we've been purely a downstream company, and I like one of the comments made today that the new era begins, the era of gas. So we all know, coming from the refining industry, that the golden years of refining are over, but at Orlen we want to be part of this new era. We want to be part of the golden years of gas. So in a couple of years I would like to come here and say that I am from Orlen, a gas and oil company. And I'm sure that this will happen. So in our strategy that we defined back in 2008, we defined 2 new business segments that we want to develop, and those are actually upstream and power generation. When I say upstream, I mean we really count on shale gas. Okay, so let me talk now a little bit about Poland, just to give you the background. Poland is the 6th largest country in the European Union, which we joined back in 2004. It was already mentioned that we are really proud of it, that since July we've been holding the EU presidency. It's a very exciting time for us. And the Polish economy has been strong for the last couple of years. And this is something also that we are very proud of, that back in 2009 and 2010 we were actually the only country in Europe that resisted the financial crisis. We recorded a positive GDP growth, in the contrary to the other European countries which really suffered, and their economies that time were actually shrinking. So there was a question about the service industry. Can the service industry develop in Poland? I think this is the answer. When you look at the direct investments in Poland, and for your benefit, I just selected some of the investments from the US companies, you will see the companies representing all different industries. And I think that is the best answer. Of course, just come and do business in Poland. You'll find friendly people who like foreigners, who are open-minded, entrepreneurial. So I'm sure that if there is a demand, then the service industry will develop very, very quickly. When we speak about energy, about shale gas, it is important also to look at the potential appetite for energy in Poland, and let's have a look at the current structure of the consumption. Poland has clearly relatively large energy resources, but unfortunately they mainly occur as coal. So domestic resources of coal are estimated about 56 billion tons, which could make us, as was said about shale gas, it will satisfy our needs for 300 years with shale gas. So it could satisfy our needs in terms of when we look at coal. Unfortunately, European Union is not that happy about coal anymore, and I think that this cannot be sustained. So we'll need to give up coal. We'll need to look at alternative energy sources. So we are really glad that the shale gas comes here. There is a number of challenges and some structural challenges that we will face, or we're facing already. Polish economy, as I said, is based on coal. as a primary source of energy. And we also have some ambitious plans, that it was already said, to develop the nuclear power plants. However, given the recent tragedy in Fukushima, and we can expect some real challenge from the other EU countries, and especially I mean Germany, who actually decided to shut down all of their power plants, because EU just doesn't want nuclear power plants anymore. So this will be a real challenge for us actually to defend our standpoint and to build those nuclear power plants in the next couple of years. As far as the natural gas is concerned, the industry actually was the main consumer of gas when you look at the consumption in Poland in 2010, with 57% share. The household's consumption is about 28%. So actually the consumption is really industry driven. However, when you compare Poland actually to the other European countries, you will see that we have one of the lowest actually consumption in Europe. For instance, when you look at Spain, it's like twice bigger. They have twice as big consumption as Poland, which means that there are some prospects for growth because our economy grows, so we can expect also the demand to grow. Of course, there is a number of forecasts about demand. I'm sure that representatives of the American companies have their own models, so you model demand and price. So I don't want to talk about it, but we think that the demand will be there, and it will be driven by several things, with actually gas-fired power plants driving in majority driving the demand. Why? Because they offer, as it was already said, 60% lower CO2 emission. They offer bigger flexibility, and lower construction costs in a shorter period of time. So we believe that the consumption will actually grow. Just a few more slides and a few more graphs for your benefit. As it was already said, we heavily depend on imports from Russia, but this is not a life sentence, or should I say death sentence. The contract of PGNiG, according to the official information, expires in 2022, so it's actually in 10 years. So I think, the pipeline, of course, will stay, the pipeline connecting Russia and going through the territory of Poland farther west. But I think that we'll be able to compete with Russian gas. So I wouldn't be afraid of Gazprom and Russians here. The Polish gas transmission infrastructure is operated by the company called Gas System, and just to give you an idea about the infrastructure that we right now have. Okay, so first let me define Poland. So Poland is the territory of Poland, or the area of Poland, is 312 square kilometers. Sorry for the matrix, using the matrix system. I hope that you can calculate that. Which means that Poland is actually, Texas itself is more than twice bigger than Poland. And we have, in Poland, we have some 9,800 kilometers of pipelines. We have 850 gas stations, 14 compressor stations, and 57 nodes. It sounds really great, but when you look at the actually shale resources, you will see, and this is the left bottom corner, that the shale resources are stretched from like north to the south, and they are more on the eastern side of Poland, whereas actually the gas infrastructure is well developed, but on the western side. And there is an answer to that. It's because the industry actually, and all the industry was located in the south and in the west, in the north, and so the gas was needed there. So of course we need to develop the infrastructure, we will need to develop the pipelines and the grid, but I wouldn't be afraid of that, because I think a gas system can deal with that quite easily. There is also a number of diversification projects going on in progress. One project that was mentioned is the construction of LNG terminal, and the deployment of that terminal is planned for 2015. So there will be different sources of gas, which mean that the market will be very competitive, which is good, but it's also a challenge for the industry. Okay, so now just you saw this probably 1,000 times, so I don't want to talk about it a lot, but just to give you an idea, as you see, I mean, Poland has the biggest resources, shale gas resources in Europe, and I believe that just as shale has dramatically changed the U.S. energy picture, both in gas and now liquids, I believe that we can expect similar phenomenon in Poland. When we look at the shale gas resources, you'll see three different basins. In the north, we have so-called Baltic Basin. In the center, we have the Lublin Basin, and then we have a Podlasie Basin. Poland compares well actually to U.S. plays. So the Baltic Basin and the Lublin Basin appear to be most similar to Marcellus Formation in the U.S. And in general, Polish resources are located in the Silurian layers between 2.6 and 3.7 kilometers deep on average. As it was already said, there had been some 100 exploration licenses granted so far, and majors hold significant acreage across Poland alongside smaller independent firms. In terms of when it comes to Orlen actually and our footprint, we have some 8 licenses right now in the Lublin Basin. Acreage is a total of 2,600 square miles. In terms of our activities, we have already started activities in 3 of the licenses. We completed the 3D seismic, and actually, as I speak, today, the last parts of our first rig are being assembled, and we are starting the drillings early next week. So we should have some answers soon about our resources. There was a question before about the opinions, about what Polish society thinks of shale gas, and here's the answer. I mean, the recent polls conducted by the company called Cebos show that, I mean, people say 73% say yes to shale gas in Poland. Of course, the picture is not so rosy. If you ask those people questions, I mean, do you mind if we build the rig next to your household? I mean, then majority of people say no. But to be honest with you, I'm not surprised. This is nothing unusual, and I think it's just a matter of proper communication to convince those who are afraid that that actually it's not so scary. And I saw a number of examples here in Texas on the Barnett Shale, where you have actually rigs next to the Starbucks, next to the filling station, next to the schools, next to the golf course. I mean, I think we can deal with that in Poland. Okay, in terms of the challenges and the risks that we see, of course, there's a long way to go. And to be honest with you, the future of shale gas, in my opinion, is still uncertain. There are lots of issues that we need to deal with. We need still to learn more about geology, about the resources that we have, and this is clearly number one. But then we also have to think about regulatory and environmental issues, infrastructure, tax, and all those things. But there was also a comment made today that the industry expects the government to step in and to work on the regulations. This is not true. This is not how it should work. It's actually industry who, in my opinion, is responsible for coming up with those regulations, or with the proposal of proper regulations, and help and give a hand to the government to implement those quicker. And this is actually the way it works. We have an organization that represents the industry, and we are working close with the government. So I'm pretty sure that we can come up with decent regulations, and that will limit your risk as the investors. Okay, so that was it. So I don't know if I answered the question if Poland can be next success story. I think we are well positioned to be there. We offer a stable business environment. we offer a unique position because we are right in the middle of Europe, right in the heart of Europe, just between Russia and the Western Europe. We offer, we are in the region that actually offers you the real GDP growth. So I think that the answer is yes. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. It's a great opportunity to be here and listen to the exchange of views about shale gas in Poland in the same sentence. So I represent Halliburton. We're a global energy services firm. We operate in about 80 countries around the globe, and with about 64,000 employees. Our focus is on upstream oil and gas development. We focus on aspects drilling through completion, through production of activities. And we've been particularly active in the development of unconventional resources, both gas and oil, here in North America. And as you have seen, this has been a very extensive and rapidly growing program. Unconventional gas now produces something like 23% of our natural gas here in North America. And it's happened over a very, very short period. Initial unconventional developments, which are sort of characterized, let's say, by the Barnett, for example, took quite some time to come to fruition, 10 years or so. But with each successive shale development, the pace of development has increased. And so now as we look at the Eagle Ford, for example, the timescales from original or initial exploration through to full phase development have shrunk substantially. And so the timescales that we're dealing with here are really quite short in the traditional scope of oil and gas development. So speed becomes very important. So in addition to our exposure here in North America in all the major shales here, unconventional development is now starting to move rapidly internationally, whether that's in Mexico, Argentina, Australia, or indeed in Poland, where we're delighted to be a part of the exploration and appraisal phase, as I will call it, as we start to get into the early parts of full field development in Poland. So it may be very helpful to kind of think about some of the things that are important to us as we look at our degree of investment in unconventionals. And we kind of think about four key things. We obviously think about the geology. The geology is really important, obviously. Without favorable geology, we really don't have anything. And as you heard earlier, there are some really interesting analogues as we look around the globe from some of the unconventional shale developments here in North America, which are very helpful to us in terms of thinking about ultimate economic recoveries and also the ways in which we might go about exploiting some of these resources in support of our key customers. The second thing we think about quite a bit is infrastructure. Is the infrastructure in place to help our customers monetize their investment? And obviously that's key. It's been a key here in North America too. Tremendous amount of investment taking place, particularly in the midstream arena, in the gathering of resource and moving it into major markets. And the lack of that can in some cases cause disparities in terms of overall energy pricing. It may well be, it's certainly a contributor to the gap in pricing of plus or minus 25% between Brent and WTI at the moment. The third thing we think about is the regulatory and pricing environment. Without those in place, clearly development is clearly strained. And finally, scale. A lot of capital is applied to unconventionals to develop them, and without scale, and scale includes speed as well, without the combination of those two factors, the ultimate economic drivers for our key customers are challenged. And so the combination of the geology, the infrastructure, the regulatory and pricing environment, and the scale are all key elements. And I hope that they'll provide some kind of feedstock for some from Q&A after we've had our introductions. Thank you.
Let me introduce myself. My name is Paweł Gociak. I know my last name is not easy to pronounce them. I would like to repeat it. Okay, this is... I'm so sorry, but we are not produce any special presentation for this meeting. But such emergency situation is quite normal. Quite a daily situation for the ANP people that we just loaded some slides. And by background, I'm a geologist. I'm still in touch with the geology, G&G issues in the company. This is very nice, and I would like to focus mainly on the exploration in Poland. And yeah, that's going. Okay. Let's keep some corporate slides. It is probably not so important for you. Just a moment. Okay, and let me give you a short, brief history of exploration in Poland. Okay, this is the map of license, current situation in Poland, and let me give you some brief history of exploration in Poland. It started in Carpathian Mountains. It's there. It is a nest of the upstream, not only in Poland but practically worldwide. The first dug well was not drilled but dug in 1854, and first field was put on stream 6 years later. That was production of oil. It was used for the lights in the hospitals, in such household, and so on. And it's this part produced in just before the First World War. It was first production place around the world. It produced about 2 million metric tons of oil each year. That was a really big production at that time. And going further, it is start exploration in the Carpathian Forest Deep in 20th last century, with the peak of exploration and discoveries in 60s. It was the biggest gas field discovered in the 60s. It's end of 50s and the first years of 60s. It was a field called Przemyśl. It's split by the Polish-Ukrainian border, 2 parts, but together its reserves, the correct reserves, is about 100 BCM. And after that, we start the exploration in the western part. It started in 60s with the peak of exploration discoveries in 70s. It was the first one, and the second one in 90s. It was after gaining the technology, the seismic, 3D seismic technique from Western, and it was the next peak of discoveries in 90s. And this is the current situation, and all these green ones, blocks, are owned by POGC. This is exploration license. This dark one, smaller, it is production license. It's mean the production fields, both gas and oil. And where is the shale gas? Shale gas this is the trend of shale gas, and this is also very important, that it was never a target, a real target for exploration in Poland. That is, it was some wells were drilled, mainly in 60s, mainly 70s practically, but it is especially the shale deposits, which are Ordovician and Syria, was never a target for the exploration. That was drilled very fast with a quite heavy mud, without good course, without good wireline. Practically, it was never. No one focused on that. That is the real challenge now in Poland, that we do not have good data, good G&G data, and let's say that's my comment, my remarks. Main one is that we are talking about the reserve. The technically recoverable reserves in Poland, but it is based on very little data. That means it is very, very difficult to trust in such numbers. And in my company, we do not evaluate any reserves, any estimation of the reserves yet. We are working on that, but please remember, this is very, very little data. It is practically zero new data. It is just drilled some wells this year. It is definitely not enough. It is some information about our upstream all around the world. I will skip it, but I would like to find one more slide. Okay. I'm sorry. Okay, this is once again the trend of shale gas and our license. We're keeping now 15 licenses in the shale gas trend, and we just we spot first vertical well on this license in northern part of Poland just December last year. Ended drilling by March, and we did first frac job in the vertical well just in September. And I'm not sure. I have one more slide. Sorry, it's working so hard. Sorry. Oh, this is the well pad, by the way. This is well pad of our first shale gas well. This is some information, but I would like to show one more. On that one. Okay, this is some nice animation. It's working. Okay. Fracturing, and what I would like to show you is gas on the surface. Okay, that's we fired the flare on our first shale gas well. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we have a few minutes for discussion and questions. Let me open up to the audience if you have some questions for the panelists.
I have a question because you mentioned that there are few wells drilled through shales, but I think in your part of presentation I saw something about seismic data. Did you shot 2D or 3D seismic?
That's when we actually shoot 2D seismic. 2D seismic, but let's say for the shale gas exploration, in my opinion, the seismic is not so important. Because it is let's say we are talking not about the single field, small one. We are talking about the basin. That means that in Poland, fortunately, the recognizing by seismic is quite well. That is so much old seismic. No, not old, but done some years ago, and just by reinterpretation, reprocessing is practically enough to let's say to spot the first pilot wells.
Mm-hmm. And I have the same question to Mr. Kozłowski. How is the seismic survey developed in Orlen for the shales in Poland?
Well, as I mentioned, out of 8 licenses we've been working on 3 so far, and on most of them we completed the seismic. So we targeted the places where we want to drill wells, and we'll just continue drilling right now. So but sorry, we will not really disclosing at this point of time any details. I hope you will understand why. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm not sure that this is exactly what you would like to talk about, but I remember lots of discussion about coal bed methane with your huge coal deposits think Amoco and McCormick Resources and other people were involved in helping develop the methane. Has anything come of that? One has stopped hearing about that, and I wonder why that didn't work.
I'm not so familiar with the CBM, but as far as I know, that all U.S. companies leave Poland many years ago, mainly due to, let's say, uncommerciality of the CBM, and that's my understanding is that there's this U.S. Practice, U.S. technology doesn't work in Polish coal mines. That was, in my opinion, it was the real reason for that. And this is also what we are thinking about. It is that if someone use just technology from, I don't know, Canada or US, not thinking about the local specification, local settings, it probably does not work. Also in shale gas.
If I could add a comment to that, not specifically about Poland, but in general, coal bed methane continues to be a viable resource, but I think the truth is that the sort of prolific nature of unconventionals has put it higher up in terms of the development chain. And so if you have to make choices about your resources, if you have shale in your portfolio, you're more likely to develop shale over CBM if you have that choice.
Grzegorz Kozłowski, Embassy of Poland. A question to Mr. Timothy Probert. You have mentioned about 4 key areas of developing unconventional gas, and one of them is scale. How critical is alternative use of unconventional gas in transportation sector, in plastic industry sector, in other sectors?
Well, let me answer that in 2 ways. I think, if we take a look at North America, just to use that as a bit of a proxy, gas has struggled really to gain a foothold in terms of base load power generation over the years. One of the reasons is there's been a very volatile commodity from a pricing standpoint. So pricing has gone up and it's gone down, and it's very hard for producers and power users to come together on a long-term contractual relationship. Gas is taking a bigger bite of power load today, and it's continued to grow. And I think the one thing we could say about unconventional gas is that the magnitude of it has tended to reduce volatility and reduce overall price, which puts pressure on service companies and producers to be as efficient as they can be, of course. With respect to alternative uses of gas outside, base power load generation and industry and the chemical industry, a lot of the gas that we produce in North America has some liquids associated with it, which helps both the economics and also, provides additional feedstock for other industries too. And in terms of wholesale movement towards natural gas powered transportation, for example, a lot of discussion taking place at the moment. I think the environment for the use of gas is certainly gaining some traction in North America. In China also, where there's a significant move towards gasification of transportation. So I think this is an evolving topic. It's one in which it's very hard to provide some definitive suggestions about where things may go, but I would say incrementally much more positive than we saw 2 or 3 years ago.
One of the issues that's very critical in the Northeast United States regarding the environmental impacts of shale gas development is frac fluid disposal. I would like to hear your comments about treatment and ultimate disposal of frac fluid according to your operations in country.
Yeah, I think that when a frac is undertaken, somewhere between sort of 15 and 30% of the fluid which is injected into the well is returned. And the the opportunity is to obviously recycle those fluids, and I think that the industry in general and Halliburton as well has moved towards helping our customers dispose of or recycle those fluids by essentially taking them, reutilizing them by essentially removing solids and certain ions which are destructive to the process, and then using those fluids also for the next fracture stimulation job. So, big effort there, significant amount of activity in recycling of water taking place today.
I have one question related to the relationship between the geology and the fracking technology. You mentioned about the very specific properties of the reservoir, which we have to understand to start fracking. But my question is, if we are started to do this fracking job in Poland, we have to modify the technology which is coming from US, from the different reservoirs, or this is working as it is right now to get gas. And also, what is the chance to develop, to improve the technology? I know the big effort is related to the propellants, for example, to the nanotechnology, how we can better hold the reservoir, avoid the shrinking back. This is the line which is, you showed very nice animation about the fracking, and we can get oil, but how this technology is universal, that we can use from place to place without thinking that different reservoir. And also I have question about the water, about the liquid which people are using for fracking. We are using like small lake for one gas well for fracking, and if the deep is 1 kilometer or 3 kilometers under the surface, this is much lower than the groundwater. It means that we are losing this water, or is chance that this water will come back to reservoir.
Okay, let me answer just for the part of your question. That's let's say I did not mention, but we bring about 800 meters of course to the surface, and did all the analysis starting from petrography via geochemistry, ending from the geomechanics, and this led us to let's say to design the first frac. It was done together with Halliburton. And that's my understanding of that is we have to prepare separately for each part of the basin, or for each area, say design the technology, not change the technology a little bit. That's my understanding. It's not universal. It is thus the case of CBM in Poland. That is what's working in USA does not working in Poland in many cases.
To answer your last question, I mean, it's true. Water is used in the stimulation process. At the end of the day, though, assuming the gas that's produced is ultimately burned to generate fuel, then that's a closed loop. You obviously produce water when you have combustion, so it is ultimately it stays in the system.
Let me just add a comment on this question about sort of the different properties of shale in different locations. I mean, even in the United States, that's been an issue. At different parts of the United States have different rock property or shale property, and that's required different drilling approaches. And we're now seeing that certain approaches that were taken in the Barnett, which is an early area that was developed in the United States, that new companies have entered the market and come up with different drilling strategies and different approaches. So even here in the United States, it's a very evolving technology. We're in the very early days of shale production. So I think that for Poland to feel that somehow its geology is too unusual, I don't think it'll be the same experience that happened with CBM. I really do think that it's a very evolving global industry, and that players that will come into Poland will develop technologies that are suitable for the reservoirs that are in Poland, just the same way that production in the Barnett is different than production in the Haynesville, which is different than strategies one would use in the Marcellus. That one thinks of maybe conceptually of the United States as being a basin, but actually the basins are very, very different. And the industry is really learning, and new tools are coming about, which you mentioned. So one of the things that I see happening a lot in the United States, which gets to part of the water problem, is more and more companies are using monitoring equipment so that they're not really drilling blindly, but there's more understanding of what's happening as drilling takes place. Second thing we're seeing is that plays that in the United States, or I think originally when people were first announcing they were drilling for shale in Texas, it was assumed that there would either be no liquids or that whatever liquids there would be, they'd be too expensive to recover them. And now we're seeing, announcement after announcement. First it was that, we all knew there was oil in the Bakken up in North Dakota, but there won't be any oil elsewhere. Or maybe the industry knew, but from the public's point of view. Then it was, actually, we're going to be able to recover liquids in the Eagle Ford. Now people are looking at Permian Basin and Niobrara play and other plays, Utica, and people are reanalyzing, how much oil will be connected with the shale production. So it's very much a new industry and an emerging industry. You have to think about it sort of like, if you've seen some of the Hollywood movies about looking for oil in the 1800s in the United States, it's not that bad, but we have a lot of technology we're throwing at it. But it's almost in a way at that stage of knowledge, in the sense that people are learning more and more about these formations and how to address them. And Rice University, for example, is working with a group of American industry to develop some of these technologies. You referenced using nanotechnologies. We're a very famous institution for nanotechnology. And one of the things that's been developed, which you allude to, is a ceramic sand, so an artificial sand. So instead of using just, regular sand, Rice has a company that's worked with industry that has a ceramic that is more successful in holding the fractures open. That has several implications. Of course, is it better for production, but also has implications for how much water you need to drive the sand. And so therefore, eventually, one's hope is that it would mean that there'd be much less water required to complete a production area. Go ahead. Yep.
This question is more refers to geology because, as you mentioned, that within the gas play in a shale, there's often also a little bit or some amount of oil play. What is the situation in shale of Poland? Did you find any oil potential, or maybe you are in the process in the early stage, so it's not possible to get it yet?
I can comment. That means I can't give any comment about the shale oil in Poland, but generally we expect in some part of our license, at least in some part of the license, we expect some shale oil, but it's definitely too early. We drill one well.
If we look at some analogs in North America, most shale plays in North America have what we call a liquids leg, and they are large or small. And in some cases, in the Haynesville, for example, we've got deep and high temperature activities that is only present in a very limited form. In other areas, it's very well developed. So every shale is different, but if we kind of look at the sort of the inventory of information which is being gathered over time, it would suggest that liquids are going to be present in most places if the sort of temperature regime or the burial regime allows it.
There were some speakers earlier talking about the hopes for increased Polish employment in all the shale gas activities. I'd be curious to understand Halliburton's view of training and prepping the industry. And once upon a time there was a comment that there were 60 frac trailers in all of Europe. Could you comment on how you're expecting the industry to ramp up, and to the extent that we have customers next to you, how they're seeing the availability of equipment?
Well, let me kick it off, and then Pavel will have a few words, I'm sure. But I mean, if we take a look at certainly stimulation equipment on a global basis, about 75% of it's in North America. So the resource base is actually the opposite of that. So clearly, lots of opportunity to develop shale, and clearly capital needs to be added to exploit it. First point. Second point, in terms of employment. I can just kind of use a bit of a proxy here in North America. For our company alone, in 2011, we will hire around about 11,000 people, a little over 11,000 people. And we're one component of the industry, and a high percentage of those will be dedicated to unconventional resources. And I think you can always think about a multiplier or a leverage, depending where you come from, effect on that, obviously down through the supply chain. So very, very meaningful impacts in terms of employment, and we certainly see that particularly as we get into certain parts of the U.S. where there really is unemployment has dropped quite sharply. So we can expect to see that. I think from an educational standpoint, an engineering standpoint, lots of talented engineers in Poland. We have a number of them training here in the U.S. right now. I don't think that's going to be an issue. It's going to be a function of scheduling training and making sure that the training is done appropriately to allow this sort of the speed, if you like, and scale to happen at the appropriate time.
Okay, let's say we as the operator of the license, we see there's a lack of tools, of equipment in Europe, onshore Europe generally, and it's not only related to the fracking, but also we see the problem with the drilling rigs. There's not enough drilling rigs, and taking into account that's the statement of other operators in Poland that they plan to drill, I don't know, 40 wells or more next year. Is definitely not enough rigs, not enough equipment in Europe.
Like 3 or 5 rigs.
Oh, yeah, that's.
It's on its way.
Yeah.
Can you give us an idea of what the financial incentives are with landowners and how the mineral structure is set up in your country, as far as how that's where it has to start from a mineral standpoint before you get on a landowner? And are they motivated to see that come?
Okay, it is the same situation as all the continental Europe. That's been the mineralized. That's been 2 meters below the surface. Everything below 2 meters it's below. It is the state treasury, and then it says the owner of the land has no right to any hydrocarbons produced. That is only ways is just to compensate the usage of terrain or by the land. That's the way.
Yeah, the surface part of it is where they get their compensation.
Yes, this is definitely different than USA.
And what are the typical economic terms? Are there standard concession terms?
Let's say that's mean in Poland we have a tax royalty regime. That's mean the tax is corporate income tax is 19%, 19 at the moment, and royalty is quite low. And in all the rankings of most friendly oil and gas tax system, we are on the top 10. That hint is not a big problem.
Other questions? Okay, well, the good news is lunch is ready. Now you see me texting. That was what I was checking. So our schedule is we have a nice lunch, and we can now take a leisurely lunch because we're ahead of schedule. And then I think, given the fact that we're ahead of schedule and we have a long panel, many great experts for the afternoon, let's come back at 1:45 to start the session. Okay, thank you very much.